Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, Making Friends, a webinar for children and youth. Thank you for joining us. We are joined today by Colleen Wheatley and Christine Dela Cruz. And today we are going to be talking about making friends for children and youth, tips and tricks from our people from the community, as well from Colleen. So to begin, we will start with a land acknowledgement. AboutFace is committed to inclusion and diversity, in keeping with Indigenous practices and building respectful relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples of Canada. We want to recognize the traditional territories or ancestral lands of the Indigenous people. Since we are meeting virtually, I would like to recognize that the Indigenous people are the traditional keepers of the lands and waters where each of us is joining from. I also do this in the hopes that it inspires you to learn more about the land and the people who took care of this land long before we got here. If you'd like to learn more about the land that you are coming from or that you're joining us from today, you can text the number on the screen, and you can also visit the website native-land.ca. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some Zoom etiquette that will be used for today's webinar. If you have never been on a Zoom webinar before, I'll explain a couple of things. Only the panelists and hosts will be visible on the screen, as well as the screen that's being shared. You, the participants, will not have video access, but you can participate using the chat and the Q&A options at the bottom of your screen. Please use the Q&A box for all of your questions. The chat will be used for you to participate in this webinar. Questions may get lost in the chat, so we do highly encourage you to use the Q&A box. We will do our best to answer all of your questions throughout the webinar today. However, we may be limited with time, so please make sure to do so accordingly. One last thing before we start is we want to ensure that you are aware that we're not providing any specific advice or counseling today, but if you do have specific questions that maybe consider this, we would direct that you speak to your healthcare team about this. Now I'll hand it over to Colleen and Christine to introduce themselves, and then we'll begin the webinar.
Hi, my name is Colleen Wheatley. I've been involved with the facial difference community. I've been a member since I was a baby, and I'd say involved since I was about 10 or 11, just involved with AboutFace, either as a volunteer, a staff member, in programming like Camp Trailblazers, lots of different things. So when I talk about these things, I talk about some of this from my personal experience, as well as from things I've learned from other kids, from other parents, from other adults that I've worked with. And I also am a social worker who works as a mental health clinician in school. So very excited, and thank you for the time on going over some things that are very important and near and dear to me. Christine?
Hello, my name is Christina Cruz. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to our webinar today. I'm calling from Toronto, and my pronouns are she and her. I've been very involved with AboutFace for quite a while, actually, now. So I started off as a Trailblazers camper, and then I went on to be a volunteer, and I currently volunteer in many ways for the organization by sitting on the constituency committee, as well as being a peer-to-peer as well, mentor. And I help out wherever I can. And currently I'm a teacher with the Toronto District School Board. And welcome.
Great, so hopefully this can be engaging. We'll be asking questions. If you are present, feel free to join in. If you're watching this as a recording, then I'm just hoping that you can kind of take some time to answer these questions yourself, or maybe you're watching it with a friend or a family member, and you can have some of these conversations as well, because I will be kind of asking some questions, because we all have friends and want to find friends. And so a lot of it is really learning from each other and learning from other people's experiences. So why are we talking about making friends? I think one of the reasons we're talking about it is a lot of people assume that this is easy and it happens kind of without any work. I know adults, myself included, at times have been like, oh, just go make friends. And sometimes it is that easy, but other times it really isn't, and it really doesn't feel that easy. A lot of people do have worries about bullying. This doesn't mean every single day, but sometimes when we're thinking about, maybe starting at a new school or a new activity or a new camp. And I think it's really helpful to know that research shows that having one friend present actually decreases the likelihood of being bullied. So it's kind of one of those things where it can also be a strategy that can be helpful for dealing with other things that we deal with in life. And I always think it's helpful to know that there are different types of bullying and things like microaggressions, which when I was a kid, I would have had no idea what that word meant. But I definitely did experience it. So these can be times where maybe like everybody else is invited to a party, but one person is left out, or everybody else goes and plays a game at recess. Or sometimes, and I know I'm not the only one in the facial difference community who has gotten these comments where it's like, oh, I don't care what you look like. I know you're beautiful on the inside, which like, yeah, I'm a pretty good person. But I also want to be beautiful on the outside as well. And, you know, most days I do feel like I'm pretty good on the outside too. And also talking about these things, these social skills, they're not organic. Like they don't just appear. They take time and they take practice to develop. So it's not like a switch where we can be like, I am on friend making mode and I just have to flip this switch and I know how to do it automatically. It takes practice, it takes learning. If you're someone like me, I learn through mistakes, which means I'm super, super smart because I've made a lot of mistakes. And things do get easier over time, which, you know, being someone who's in my 30s is easy for me to say because I can look back and be like, yeah, you know what, things are easier. You know, when I was, it doesn't feel like it all the time, right? It doesn't feel like things will get easier. So again, it's just sometimes recognizing, okay, things might not go perfectly the first time and that's okay. So when we talk about friends, I think it's really important to talk about friendship as a choice. Sometimes, you know, there's the assumption that everybody's going to be friends with everybody else in their class. Sometimes I feel like when I was in grade 5, I had like a magical class where like it did feel like we all got along. Of course, that was just my experience. There were probably other kids in that class who did not feel the same way. We don't get to be friends with everyone, but also like we don't have to be friends with everybody else as well. And again, I think sometimes adults, we kind of think that it's that easy. Oh, we'll just go get along. And the reality is we might not be friends with everybody, and that's okay. So I think also recognizing, you know, there are good choices and there are bad choices when it comes to friendships, and also recognizing that like sometimes we learn through the process. So I think it can be helpful when we think about who do we want to be friends with? You know, what do we look for? What are some of those qualities that we look for in friendships? And sometimes it can be easier to look for things that we want in those friendships. So maybe someone who like has some things in common, some similar interests, is nice, makes us laugh. And then who are people where it's like, you know what, I don't need to be friends with them. I feel like adults, you know, kind of, you know, sometimes adults are like, oh, go be friends with everyone. But if you turned around and asked that adult, well, are you friends with everyone you work with? Are you friends with every single one of your neighbors? The answer would probably be no. So also there's people where it's like, who do we, you know, we might avoid people who aren't nice, or, you know, sometimes there might be someone who like, I thought was going to be my friend, but actually it turns out they're not that nice. And maybe they make fun of me. You know, maybe they're not paying attention to me. And also sometimes, you know, I'm someone who jokes around. I'm someone who's sarcastic. So I've also had people who've been like, you know what? There are some things you can't joke about, or, you know, this style of teasing doesn't work for me. And then sometimes, you know, I need to learn, I need to stop, I need to know. So sometimes it's kind of figuring out what do we want in those friendships, as also what are kind of our deal breakers and what are things where people can learn, right? Sometimes it can say telling a friend, you know what, like, I get that you really like Taylor Swift, and that's great for you. I don't want to talk about Taylor Swift every single day. We can talk about her sometimes, but like, I don't want to only listen to her music. So sometimes it does take a little bit of communication as well. So here are some steps we're going to talk about that we can use to develop some of our friendship skills. And one of the first ones is really getting to know ourselves. Most relationships are kind of an exchange, right? You know, you want to spend time with someone who's fun, who makes you smile, all of those things. So what do we offer? What makes us a good friend? And also that means that we know that we can say, hey, we don't need to be friends with someone who doesn't treat me nicely. I don't need that friendship. So why would people want to be our friend? That can make it a little easier. What do we look for in a friend? And then a big thing is practice, 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 which, you know, kind of is weird of like, how do I practice making a friend? But sometimes it is practicing introducing ourselves, practicing going somewhere new, going somewhere where we can meet new people. You know, maybe it's going to, if we have that friend who's having a party and all we know is the birthday person and we don't know everyone else, I can get nervous and, you know, I can get worried because I don't know everyone else. And so, you know, sometimes it's practicing. So then it means when I do get an invite to the next party, I go, okay, you know, the last one, I mean, it was pretty good. It wasn't perfect, but like it was pretty good. And there's something that I can build on the next time and make it worthwhile. So the first step we're going to talk about is developing a positive sense of self or self-esteem. And the reason that this is an important step is because this way we are finding friends that fit our needs versus me looking around the class or maybe looking around camp and saying, okay, I need a friend. Okay, I need to convince that person to be my friend. Because it's pretty hard. It can be scary, but also like we all deserve to have friends who like us for who we are. And so I do acknowledge that this is way easier said than done. I mean, look at this picture, like someone walking on like a walkway and modeling, and like she makes it look super easy. But I know if I was to do that, I mean, I could probably do it, but I'd be a little nervous first. So what could I do to actually get up there and get kind of doing something where I feel good? And again, this takes work. So if I ask, what does self-esteem mean? Has anyone heard of that word? Adriana, Christine, I might ask you folks to join in. What does self-esteem mean to you, or ways that it's been described to you?
Sure, Colleen, I can chime in on that. So for me, when I think of self-esteem, I think of self. So like the positive attributes I have about myself, the things that I like about myself, the things that really make me who I am, right? And one of the things I am working on still actually up to now, but that I have worked on for like my entire life is like building that self-esteem, right? And one of the ways that I do that is actually think of the positives about myself. What are some skills I have? What are some great things that I can like offer? Or like what are some things that, you know, that other people like I've heard that other people like about me, right? And this helps you build that self-esteem about yourself. Yeah. That's what I think about when I hear the word self.
Amazing. That's fantastic. And this might be hard for folks to believe. I'm going to go to the next slide, which actually Christine and I did not consult on ahead of time. And I see, yeah, positive attributes, how I feel myself, how I view myself, and think about those positives. And again, I think we are naturally inclined. It's easier. Like I can tell you things that I don't like about myself pretty easily. Those pop up in my head pretty easily. And it actually can take a little more work and practice to find the things that I like about myself or that other people like about me. And that's just good thing is it does get easier with practice, but it can feel kind of weird. And I think also sometimes people think that that means we're not humble or it means we're bragging. And it's, you know, there's a difference between walking into a room and saying, I'm the best looking person here, to walking into a room with my shoulders back, with my head up, thinking like, I look okay today. I'm looking pretty good. So you can have those positive thoughts, and it's a good thing. So exactly. Here are just some different notes about building self-esteem. I think it's really important. And actually there you can see on the side, it's the positive affirmations, which Christine kind of talked about. And sometimes these do feel kind of silly, I'll be honest. Like I always do my best. I try to do my best, right? I am brave. I've done things that scare me. I'm good enough. I'm good enough. And like, that's pretty good. And these things so these are things that genuinely I have written out. I've said out loud. I've practiced saying out loud in the mirror. And yes, it absolutely feels silly at first, but it does get easier. And then those are things that I can remind myself of, maybe on those days when I'm not feeling so good. Or else sometimes some people like writing them down, so that way you can look back. So whether it's, keeping track of some photos, not necessarily the photos where you look really good, but the photos where you're proud of yourself or you did something challenging, those photos that make you think of those things, or notes that you can refer to on those days. And so again, I don't expect everyone to have those amazing days every single day. I don't have those amazing days every single day. I used to, when I was a kid, I thought, especially with relation to my facial difference, I thought that the only choices I had were like loud, proud, I don't care what anyone says, or else like really sad and lonely sitting in a dark room, when like actually I had both good and bad days. Because there were some days when maybe I wasn't feeling great about myself, and that's okay. I see your hand, Christine.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in actually. So one of the things that I recommend is actually, like, I like the point that you brought up about like writing it down and having it around you so she has it on her mirror. So like, even though she doesn't have to say it, like she sees it. So it's like a thing that she would see like every morning or like at the end of the day. So it's kind of like a reminder, right, of the wonderful things that she is. And then also another reminder at the end of the day if she has a bad day, right? I know something that I do personally is like, I like to keep a gratitude journal. So I like to actually write like good things that happened throughout the day, even like things about myself, things that I did that day that was really successful, including like maybe having a difficult conversation, maybe getting over a challenge, maybe overcoming something hard, right? Like it just helps like to build that esteem as well. So keeping like a journal, like a diary, is like something that I do and I recommend also to like others too.
Absolutely. So, and research shows that that's actually effective in teaching our brain to look for those positive things. And again, it's not going to happen the first time, but maybe after, a couple months, going back to it. And it's one of those things where by the time it's working, like it's taking a little less effort. So, and being aware how we talk about ourselves, getting involved with an extracurricular, things that we like. So, and I mean, like I write that I like sports. I am not good at all sports. And actually I'm a pretty slow learner at sports, which it took me until my 30s to learn, but I like trying. So sometimes it's figuring out where like, yeah, I absolutely tried out for like soccer, maybe even baseball. Like I tried out for a bunch of teams that like I did not make and I did not expect to make. I think what helped made that easier too, though, is like I did make the basketball team, right? So sometimes it is finding that balance, and it can be, trying things like going out and being like, I might not make this team, and that's okay. Again, I'm not suggesting that it's super easy and that everybody do that, but I'm just saying it is an option. So now I want to talk a little bit about what makes ourselves, what makes us a good friend. So again, this can be like a little bit challenging, but it can be thinking about, well, why would someone want to spend time with me? One thing I know I talk about myself, I can be a pretty funny person, maybe not necessarily all the time when I'm doing PowerPoints, and then of course, when I say I'm a funny person, someone's like, make me laugh now. I'm like, that's not really the kind of funny I am. I'm more of a like response. I like smiling. I like making other people laugh. Those are some qualities that I think make me a good friend. Adriana, Christine, would you be able to share a couple qualities that might make you a good friend?
I would say that some things that make me a good friend would be, I like to make people smile and laugh too. I feel it makes people feel a little bit more comfortable too, especially if you're just meeting them too. And then also I'd say thoughtful. I like to remember people's birthdays or little details about themselves and then ask them about certain things or little things that they say.
Huh, I feel like Adriana's done that to me and I didn't even know. Ah, that's an awesome quality. Christine?
Something that makes me a good friend, I would say I'm very caring. I've been told by my friends that I'm very caring. Like I care a lot about people, whether it's their well-being or how they are doing that day, or like things like that. One of the things I do is I like to like remember things about my friends as well. So it shows like that I think about them or like I remember them and stuff like that. Another thing that I think makes me a good friend is that I'm understanding. I'm very empathetic. So I try to put myself, when my friends are having like a difficult situation, I try to put myself in like their shoes and see if I can help them that way. Is like always be kind, right? And I always be kind to everyone around me, whether like they're a close friend, whether they're like a friend from afar. But I think those are the things that make me a good friend.
Awesome, thanks so much. And I feel you can tell we've practiced some of these things as well. And I just put a note on there as well. Like, I'm not perfect. I know that I'm not a perfect friend. And also I don't expect anyone else to be a perfect friend because to be honest, I would be kind of intimidated if someone was always perfect. So I think it's also acknowledging, and that does mean being patient with others as well as ourselves. So now I'm asking, well, what are some qualities that we look for in other friends? What are some things that, like for me, I want someone who cares about other people, right? I think that's pretty important to me. What about you, Adriana and Christine? What are some qualities that you look for in other friends?
I would say being kind and seeing how they treat other people so that they're nice to other people. And a simple example could be how you see them treat the wait staff when you go out to a lunch or a dinner with them as well.
That's a great example.
For me, I definitely agree with what already has been said. So someone who's kind, someone who's caring, someone who's thoughtful. For me, I actually also look for someone who can make me laugh on my bad days, or someone who can really bring me up when I feel down, or someone who I can easily talk to, or someone I can talk, like, just call up if I'm ever having a bad day, or if I need to talk to someone. I think those friends who are reliable, I think that is a really good quality to have when you're looking for a friend.
Absolutely. And yeah, so these were just some I had thought of. Common interests could make it easier, but not necessarily a requirement. Similar values, thoughtful, maybe having different skills, maybe something that I can learn from as well, can always be helpful too. So this is a little bit where we talk about developing our personal interests, right? Things that we find interesting, things that we like doing. And sometimes I think that this can be easier as an adult because like we get to make those decisions of how we spend our time, what we're doing. But definitely as kids and youth, we get to kind of explore and figure this out. So this is a little bit of like personal interest. So for me, I mentioned sports. Like I like playing sports, even though I'm not super good at all of them. So sometimes it's like also finding those friends where like I might not play baseball with everyone. I might not play baseball with my friends who take it very seriously and want to win every single game. I might be like, you hold out. I'm going to go play with those people over there who aren't keeping score, right? That's something. These can also change. I mean, I'd say even when I was in my 20s, if you had told me that I was going to start playing Dungeons and Dragons on a regular basis, I would have been like, turns out it's actually super fun. So kind of finding some of our own personal interests. So maybe if we can just mention one or two personal interests that either could be something we like doing alone or something we like doing with other people. Like one right now, I have a dog. I take my dog, my favorite thing to do, my most consistent thing to do is I take my dog for walks. And so right now, the friends that I hang out with, kind of like, okay, are we going for a dog walk? because that's a way I could also multitask as well. But again, doesn't work. I've got some friends who are afraid of dogs, so we have to do other activities. I saw Christine, I saw you unmute.
For me, one of my biggest interests is dance. I love doing all types of dance. So I love hip hop, I love contemporary, I love jazz funk, all of that. And I've actually built like a small group of friends in my dance classes that I like see on a regular basis. Also, just helps that you can dance together, that you can have fun doing something that you both love and all that. And I'm actually hoping that my friends that I hang out with are also start to see that interest too, which is cool. But yeah, one of my interests is definitely dance, and I'm very happy that I'm able to build relationships with like the dance community. So.
Absolutely.
And I would say one of my personal interests is hiking. I don't have a dog, but I like to go on hikes and walks with some friends. And I feel that it's a good way just to catch up and spend some time in nature and just kind of talk about what's going on in each other's lives if we haven't seen each other, especially in some time.
Absolutely. And I think what's great too about things like hiking is that something that you can do by yourself as well as with other people. So it's an interest where it's like, okay, great. If I have a friend who can join me, awesome. But if I don't, I can still go for a hike. I mean, safe and all those things, but I can still do that on my own, which I think is really nice. So here's just kind of a little bit of a list of like, okay, how do we find these interests and how do we turn it into, opportunities to meet other people and make friends? And again, this doesn't mean that like every time I'm on a hike, if I saw Adriana, I'd be like, you're on a hike, I'm on a hike. We should go on a hike sometime, right? I'm not expecting that. But I know that I do have some friends who like I have met on the same trails a couple times, right? Or you might like walk for a little while and you're kind of like chit chat, those sorts of things. So again, sometimes these can take some time and a bit of process, or it could be, maybe you're really into coding. Maybe you're into like doing some computer stuff. And a lot of schools do kind of have those coding clubs, or else all it takes is one person asking, an adult, a staff member, if there is a club. And sometimes that club might just mean that like there's a teacher who lets people go into their classroom and do coding. And so, I'm not expecting that everyone goes in there and is like, oh, let's talk about code. But it can mean that like maybe you guys do the same activity beside each other. You at least know like that, or there's someone, a really great strategy is asking for help. Everybody likes feeling helpful. So like maybe if you even know the answer, you could still ask for some help or directions, kind of all of those different things, because we all like feeling like we've done something good for other folks as well. I want to talk a little bit about I guess my question is, are there different types of friends? So Adriana, Christine, what do you think? Are there different types of friends? Are all friendships the same?
There are absolutely different types of friends. Work, school, your personal life, everything like that. I feel like you have different friends for different things. And I feel like interests also is where that plays a role as well.
Yeah, I agree with Adriana for sure. I think there's also different types of friends, and like sometimes based on how you're feeling or what you would like to do that day, sometimes you kind of choose who you reach out to. I think also just like in terms of like conversations, like maybe you want to have some deeper conversations with like maybe a closer group of friends versus like your work friends, or maybe you'll have some family friends that like you have that type bond with, whereas like your school friends are not as like close, things like that, right? So I too also think that there are different groups of friends, and like you like there's different ways that you form that relationship or that you created that bond, right? So similar interests, likes, dislikes, connections, all of that.
Yeah. And there are friends, like there are some people who, it might be like Instagram friends, right? Where that's how old I am. I use Instagram. But where like, you send each other memes, right? Or you said the same type of jokes or different songs, but like that might not be someone that you would pick up the phone and call and talk to, and all of those different things. I know for me, growing up and even now, I always think about, okay, where can I go where other people also want to make friends a little bit? I know growing up, I knew that I was going to have to, if I that kind of after high school, I was going to have to go somewhere else, either for work or education. And I was kind of nervous about that. You know, I had an older sister, so I was used to, you know, her kind of letting her take the lead with making friends. And so I did get nervous sometimes where I was like, oh, well, are they just friends with her? And then like I'm the kid sister that tags along, which absolutely was the case some of the time too. So like going places, you know, like camps, different clubs where I knew other people also needed to make friends. I have a list of situational friends, you know, so these could be, you know, like maybe someone that you take the bus with, but isn't in your grade. So you might sit together on the bus and chat for that 15 minutes. And then, you know, you hit the schoolyard, see each other at the end of the day, right? Or it could be, yeah, those friends where like you talk about sports, you talk about you like, you know, friends who talk about reality TV show. And that's really the basis of the friendship. And that's all they do is like, did you see this episode? What did you think? Right. And so it could be that there are different friends where, you know, the different friends that like you talk about what you're watching on TV, or you talk about the new songs and all of those things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's someone that you're going to call up to have a chat or invite to your birthday party, for example. Christine.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that actually. So in some cases, actually, your situational friends actually may become close friends as well. Like if you maintain that relationship beyond, let's say, the workforce or beyond like school or something, like you start to see like how closer you get, like how strong of a relationship you start to form. For example, camp bunkmates, like that instantly came up because like I'm still really close friends with some of the friends that I made at like Trailblazers or either summer camps that I went to as a kid as well. I'm also like really close friends with this one person who I met during a volunteer session at the CNE. And her and I, we now see each other like on a monthly basis. We catch up when we can, but it's just that seeing that just something like small or something like a situation like can really like be like the start of a blossoming friendship. So it's pretty awesome.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's so hard to predict. Again, as an adult, you know, I've got some friends who, you know, like when I lived in residence in university, you know, there were people who like I walked to class with every single day. You know, we had most of our meals together. We studied. I have no idea where those people are anymore. Then I've got someone who lived down the hall where like we chat with every once in a while. And then like we went camping for my 31st birthday together. I would not have predicted that. And so, yeah, sometimes things can change. And like you said, Christine, like we can't always predict these things as well. And it just sort of works out. So I think it's important to acknowledge. And I think sometimes adults, we don't always understand that, right? Where it's like, oh, like, well, but like Colleen, like you take the bus with Adrienne every single day. Why don't you want to invite her to your birthday party? And it's like, well, I do, but like Adrienne is actually also like, you know, she's like 2 grades older than me. She's got different friends. So I'm not sure, right? So sometimes it can take a little bit of explaining, you know, to others in our lives to be like, well, they're, you know, like that's a different type of a friendship. And you can just say like, even for now, things might change, right? Sometimes you become better friends, sometimes you drift with friends, and it can be hard too. So this is the next little thing, and we've talked about it a little bit. It's like, how do we find friends with common interests? I'm not a mind reader. So, you know, I'm not able to go, oh, they laughed at that joke too. You know, like they thought that joke was funny, even though they didn't laugh out loud, right? I can't tell what everybody else is thinking. So what are some ways that we're able to find friends with common interests?
If it's a sport in particular, maybe it could be signing up for the team and meeting friends on the team or at tryouts.
Absolutely.
For me, one of my interests growing up was music. So I joined different orchestras and different choir groups as well. That's how I found some friends.
Yeah, and so I agree. We talked about clubs, teams. I think also, you know, another thing for teams is also like finding like if somebody else is a Leafs fan, you're probably going to notice if they're wearing a shirt or a hat or something like that. You know, or again, for different bands or for watching different shows. And the way that I thought about this too is I was like, so, you know, if I knew this when I was, you know, when I was younger, that might be a way where, you know, instead of just saying like, oh, like I really want that Raptors shirt, just because like I really, really like that Raptors shirt. And being told, well, you don't need it. And so I might be like, well, but this is actually a tool so that I can find, so I can show other people that I like the Raptors. And then this could be a way that I find other friends with common interests. I'd be curious if that could work in trying to convince, or different badges, you know, patches, pins, different things. Like there are ways where you can like, you know, I've got a toque that says always be kind. So I've gotten compliments on like, oh, you like that? Or if I see, you know, and that's a Newfoundlander toque. So if I see anyone ever with like Newfoundland, I'm like, oh, where are you from? Did you get that while you were traveling? What happened? Ask questions, all of those things. Christine?
I definitely agree with all of that as well. And sometimes I know whenever I go to like special events or something and I like, you know, chime into a conversation, sometimes conversation starters also like help me connect with people as well. So like if I hear someone talking about Stranger Things, which is something that I'm into, I would jump in and be like, oh, like, did you see that episode where so-and-so happened? So things like that, like little things where like, maybe it's a group where nobody really knows each other, but you like hear conversations of certain things that you also like having interest in. And then you can chime in, and then before you know it, you're chatting for hours about like that one thing. And then it just leads to another thing and another thing. And then it's pretty awesome.
Excellent. And I think like that's a perfect example where I can totally see like Christine like waiting in line for something and just like chatting for hours and hours, whereas I'm like, I don't know if I would. But again, this is where practicing, right? So I can practice saying like, you know, saying, okay, I don't know Stranger Things, I apologize. But like saying, you know, like, oh, is that like a Bills t-shirt you're wearing? Like, oh, have you ever been to a game, or just kind of those things? And again, I can practice that without expecting it to turn into a friendship. So, and it might just be like, oh, hey, like, you know, hey, I really like the blue streak in your hair, right? Like that looks really cool. I really like those earrings. And so these are things where I can genuinely just practice making those comments, making those compliments, saying, oh, can I pet your dog? Can I say hi to your dog? Practice those things as well. So we can do these things without expecting, you know, that like, yes, sometimes it is magical and it turns into a great friendship, but also we can practice those things. And then it does get a little easier. And actually like, it can be kind of cool where like, you know, it is kind of like that passing kindness on, right? Where, you know, if I compliment one person, they're more likely to like walk down the street and compliment the next person, right? So again, these are just small little things that we can practice and just kind of get better at over time. So now I want to talk a little bit about what makes someone a good friend. You know, chatting with someone, having something in common, having, you know, and sometimes it can be like that subway ride, that bus ride or that flight, which like sometimes I have had great conversations when I've been traveling next to someone. Also, sometimes I've sat beside someone and they immediately put their earbuds in and they're like, no, thank you. I've also been that person on days where maybe I'm tired, maybe I have some work to do, and I don't have that energy, right? It can depend on the situation. But then this is when we're talking about like what makes someone a good friend. Maybe someone that I might call when I'm not having a good day, right? Who's someone who I could call and say, you know, I just need to vent, or I need some distraction, just someone I can call to help me feel a little better. What are some qualities that we might look for in a friendship?
I think similar to what you just said, Colleen, would be, and what says up there is trust. It's being able to rely on someone if you're having a bad day, or even if you have some good news that you want to share. It could be that friend that you want to call up and celebrate with too, but knowing that you have that foundation that is required for that solid friendship, which is usually trust.
Absolutely.
And I just want to build off on that, Adrienne, actually. So trust is a big thing I find in a friendship as well. So being able to feel comfortable and being able to know that the person that you're talking to won't be sharing that information with anybody else, especially if it's something that's really, important to them or something that they don't want shared or talked about. So I think just knowing that you're talking to someone who will keep your secret safe, who will keep whatever you tell them like to themselves, and also like, respect like any privacy as well, right? So like respect anything that you don't want shared with others. Yeah, so trust is definitely a big thing for sure for a good friend.
I've got a few other listed here, so jump in if there's anything you want to build on. I have mutual friendship on there because I think it's also very important. Like you want to have those feelings back, right? And I'll be honest, like it does not always, like there's some people in my life where I've been like, they're so cool, I want to be friends with them, I want to hang out with them all the time. But, they might have other stuff going on, they might be too busy, kind of all of those things. But I think that mutual friendship where, I'm calling them to talk on the phone, I'm dating myself, or I'm like, that's how old I am. Or like if I'm reaching out, asking to make plans, I'm sending those messages, then I want it to be reciprocated on occasion. And also, you know what? Sometimes that can also change, right? If I know that a friend is going through a hard time, sometimes, I'm like, okay, I know you don't have time. I just want to let you know I'm thinking of you. So like I'll send silly pictures of my dog or different things. And I know that like they don't need to respond back, right? And I do have friends where I'm like, I might call them a couple times, they've got other things, maybe they've got other commitments in life, they've got their own kids, they've got parents that they're looking after, all of those things. So it can really change as well, where I'm willing to reach out and I'm like, okay, they might not be able to call me back and that's okay. But then there's other times where I'm like, you know what? I asked that person, like, I think I've asked them 3 times to hang out. And every time they're busy, which legitimately can be true. But sometimes I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to wait until like they tell me that they're not busy, right? So you have that reciprocation. And I think some of these things we have talked about, like that support. And again, this is where, sometimes it can, you can figure out where it's like, okay, that's my friend that I call when I want to laugh, or like, that's my friend where like we will go out to a concert together. But I'm not going to ask that same friend to go for a hike because they hate going for hikes. Right? So sometimes it's figuring out that there are those different friendships. Anything else you folks want to add on or build on there? Great. And figuring out what I look for in a friend might not be the same as what Adriana looks for in a friend, right? Or Christine, and that's okay. We're different people. It might not be the same as what my other family members look for in a friend as well. And that can be kind of confusing and challenging at times. A little bit, I just want to acknowledge, because, if we just looked at all of our slides, we go, oh, it's easy, right? All I have to do to make a friend is I have to wear like a shirt from a show I like, and I just have to like smile and be friendly, and then I'll have tons of friends automatically. Some days it is that easy. Some days it's not. And so I just want to acknowledge, like, why can it be hard to make friends? I think for me, it means that I have to try new things sometimes. It means in order to like, sometimes it's like to meet that they're a stranger is a friend you haven't met, which like not always perfect. But, it means that I might have to go to like that party or that picnic where I only actually know 2 people. And I might get there before the people I know get there. And then I have to like be awkward and like pretend that there's something really important on my phone because like I don't know how to talk to other people. Like it can be intimidating. So there is a risk. And the reality is, I have gone to social get-togethers, or I have gone to events where I haven't walked away with a new best friend. There was a while where I tried like going to these wrestling practices because I thought it'd be pretty cool and I thought maybe I'd meet some new people. I wasn't great at wrestling. I didn't make any new best friends from it. I also didn't do it for that long. But also the reality is like I don't have a 100% success rate in making friends. So there is some risk. It doesn't go perfectly. I don't always know. And there might be times, even where, it's like, oh, I've hung out with that person, like we've gone to like 2 basketball games together and they've been really, really fun. And then, I might not hear from that person. Something might go on. I don't always know. I can't always predict like, oh, that's going to be my best friend forever. And then like, go figure, some of my friends who I've known for a decade, like I would not have predicted that like the dude who lived down the hall, would be my friend 10 years later. I think we even had 5 years where like I was like, that guy's not that nice and not that smart. And we didn't talk to each other for 5 years and then we became friends again. Right. So I can't predict my own friendships. And sometimes it is learning through experiences. Sometimes as a friend, I've made mistakes. I haven't always been the most supportive friend. I haven't always been the most thoughtful friend. And so sometimes it's learning what I can do to be a better friend. And sometimes it can be that, like I have made friends when I went to camp as a kid that like I never saw again. We maybe exchanged 1 or 2 emails and then like, we just didn't really keep in touch. That sort of just happened. And that's okay. Even though it might not feel like it in the moment, if that makes sense. So, or else maybe, like there was someone I went to school with from kindergarten until grade 7. And then they moved to Florida with one of their parents and I didn't see them again for like 20 years. Right. And we were really good friends in grade 7. But then we didn't really keep in touch when they moved. Right. Or, classes change or jobs change. And it can just be a little more challenging to be those friends and keep in touch. So sometimes it's also just some things that are out of control. I've talked a lot about why it's can be hard to make friends. I don't know. Do you have anything to add to that? All right. Then and again, it doesn't mean that it never happens, but I think sometimes we can acknowledge that like it can be scary. And it can also take a couple tries, right? So I just want to acknowledge that piece. And this is where we get to what are ways that we can do. So we've talked about like practice. I talk about role playing. I know this can feel kind of silly, but it can be, and it doesn't need to be kind of like pretending that you're like meeting someone new, but it can be kind of practicing asking someone to say, hey, do you want to play basketball with me? Or at recess, right? Hey, do you want to use the skip? Like, do you want to do some skipping with me? Kind of, do you want to play Foursquare with me? If that's not something that you've done before, that's okay. So it can be practicing, like asking caregivers, parents, siblings, practicing. And yeah, I'll be honest, I've got a pretty good friendship with my sister. She's not going to play Foursquare every time I ask her. That's okay. And so it could just be practicing. And it could be saying, like I know when I was going to a bigger school with my friends, like we did talk about what it was going to be like to make new friends. I know for me, I talked about my facial difference with my friends. And so I remember being like, I'm scared going to a new school. I'm afraid someone's going to say something. And, talking about how when my friends talked about like how what they would do, what they would say. So it can be practicing those things. Virtual settings. I still get nervous logging onto Zooms and all of those things. In person, approaching. I think a big thing is just practicing introducing myself. Hi, I'm Colleen. Even now, I'm like practicing reshaking hands. That was a skill that I had for a long time, and then I haven't done it for 2 years. So I'm realizing, and I'll be honest, sometimes I don't want to shake hands just yet. But so it is kind of practicing those different things. Christine?
So 2 points. So I know something that I use whenever I'm trying to make new friends in a new setting where I don't know anyone, is kind of gravitating towards somebody who probably has like a really cool shirt, for example. Right. And I know that we talked about like things that looking for things that might
I'm not sure my sound. I don't know if I caught that, all of that, but I think it might just be technology on my end, hopefully. But yeah, I liked what I heard. It was Christine talking about like practicing kind of those little things. And it's like everything else, it gets easier. The more that you practice, it does get easier. So, you know, whether it's if you're someone who plays an instrument, I'm pretty sure if I asked you what it sounded like the first time you played that versus maybe a year after lessons, or even if you play games like Minecraft, what level did you get the first time you played it versus after you've been playing it for a while? So sometimes we just need to remind ourselves that we get better at things over time. At least it takes me a while. So again, these are things, practice. And so I do include in there, be patient. So, you know, if you're like me and you know that wrestling, or, you know, when I've done swimming lessons and I've walked out going, I didn't make any friends on the first lesson, like I know, well, okay, I can still go back and I can still get through it. And just know that, like, you know, I might not make a friend in every club and class that I join. Or, you know, I might just make some, you know, it can be someone I can sit beside. And yeah, there are some classes where like I just go in, I do the work, and then I leave. And I sometimes I just have to be patient and tell myself, like, that's okay. So I wanted to, just before we log off, I wanted to acknowledge, I know one thing that I really value is friendships that I have within the facial difference community. I know, especially when I was younger, what I appreciated was that I didn't have to explain extra things. You know, I didn't necessarily have to explain kind of stuff. I found when I went and I met other folks in the community, like it was just a little less intimidating sometimes. You know, I just knew that it was other people who might have similar experiences to me. So, you know, and now that I have been involved with AboutFace for a couple of decades, you know, I can say that I do have some really good friends, and I do have those friends that I can call up and I can ask for questions. One friendship, and I'm thinking of two, you know, I have a friendship with my friends David and John, and they live on the other side of the country. Well, it's been a very long time since I've seen them, but every once in a while we'll like have a merged phone call, or we'll have a Skype just to check in, just to chat. My friend David will call every once in a while, and this is something where like I should practice this, and he'll just call and say, I just wanted to call and let you know that I appreciate you as a friend. And I mean, just thinking about those phone calls, and I don't think we've had one of those phone calls for like 6 months, but still just thinking about those phone calls make me very happy. And I just appreciate that I have those friendships where I can talk about my experience, either like making friends, dating, going for job interviews, moving to a new area. I know that I have someone else that can understand those. And so again, just having those friendships within the community is something that I've really valued over the years as well. So I thought I'd see if either of you also just want to talk about a quick celebrate a friendship that you have within the facial difference community. Thanks, Christine.
Similar to Colleen, actually. So I have a group of girls that I really connected with a lot through like AboutFace, and each of these girls, I met them at different points in like my facial difference journey, but they have been really special to me, and they, not gonna lie, I feel like they're one of the people that I really can talk to about anything and everything, including like my difference, any challenges I might have, any situations I'm going through. And then also like, I feel like they understand me. Like it's one of those things, like for me, like friendship within the facial difference community is like really special, because they're these people who really understand who you are, because they've probably been through the same thing, even though they have a different facial difference than you, but they've probably been through similar challenges. They can support in any way, they can provide advice, and they're also very trusting. I find that these group of girls that really come to mind, that they're very like trusting, and I feel like I can tell them anything and know that my information will always be safe and not shared with anyone else. So my girls are, so Colleen, I met her at Trailblazers. She's my girl, she's amazing. And even though she now lives in the middle of nowhere, she lives elsewhere now, like we still really maintain that strong like relationship, that strong friendship, like over voice, like video chats, over voice calls if we can, texting, social media, like in different ways. I'm also really close with like Jane and Net as well. They also live in other parts of like the US and Ontario, but we still try to maintain that really close bond by like either those one-on-one chats, but also like those group chats. They go on for hours. We can talk for like half an hour to like 4 hours sometimes, but it's a really, really special bond to me that I really cherish a lot. So
awesome, thanks for sharing. And I think also just on the topic of friendship too, is I know like I've been a part of some of those like group chats where like they go on and I'm not there the whole time, but also where it's like, you know, being a part of those friends. And I know that, you know, there's those tighter connections. And so I know I don't see everyone in that group as often, but there have been times where I've kind of like tagged along, or we've been at events and seen each other. So I think also acknowledging that, like, you know, like that's a group of really good friends who like, I can still spend time with them and get along with them, even though I'm older than them. I don't spend as much time, but like, you know, can still be included in those groups as well. Because I think sometimes it's like, oh, well, those are really good friends, so I can't approach. But so I think just like that was a good reminder as well. And so those are just, I just want to acknowledge some of those really great friendships in the facial difference community, which again, those are some of those things where we can have our facial differences in common, as well as lots of other interests, because my facial difference is only like, it's a piece of who I am. But there's so many other things that make me who I am. And so it's finding people with those other interests. So this is really, we've covered a lot of things, talking about friendships, talking about different strategies. Some of these might be helpful. There might be some other ideas out there to share as well, but I just really appreciate taking the time to watch this webinar, and I really appreciate Adriana and Christine in joining. So now there's just a quick time if there's any questions, comments, notes that we would like to add on, but absolutely appreciate the conversation we've had.
Thank you so much to Colleen and Christine for joining us today and for hosting the webinar. It was greatly appreciated to have you share your insight, your experiences, and share the tips and tricks on how to make friends within the community. We do not have any questions further to the webinar, but on behalf of AboutFace, we'd like to thank all those who joined, and again to Colleen and Christine for joining us today. And this was recorded. It'll be uploaded to our YouTube channel at a later date for viewing. So please stay tuned for that. On behalf of AboutFace, thank you for joining us.